Hello, B1 family. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, The Big Black American Secret. I am Daniel Jackson, and as promised, I said I'd come back later today and make a video to kind of go more into what I discovered over the last couple of weeks. And what the discovery was is that there were black Europeans. Yeah. We were all taught that Europe was a white continent. They give us a story about the Neanderthal gene found in Europe, and all of this crazy crap, when all the time there were black Europeans, right? If you want to go back to my video, I made a video about a week ago. Yeah, it's 2 or 3 videos behind this one or in front of this one, and it goes into it. But I'm going to get into some of the stuff in this video, but it's just a little bit more proof about some things. Now, I was watching Glen Beck. Well, let me back up a little bit. About 6 months ago, I was making a video, and before I made the video, I was trying to find the information from the director of the Smithsonian, who made a statement, and his statement was he wasn't interested in any information pertaining to anything but the savage Indians, which what he was pointing to was, I was doing some research on the Clovis first theory. What that was, paleontologists had found some cutting stones and some tools that were used by prehistoric people, and they said that these people were the people who came across the Bering Straits about 13,000 years ago. These were a Mongolian breed of Asian who supposedly came here and who were the natives, the natives peoples here, the first natives peoples here in the Americas. Again, they came here across the Bering Strait from Asia. So technically these people are Eskimos, right? So the director of the Smithsonian said that he was not interested in digging down any further than the Clovis first theory, which was down probably about 13,000 feet. He didn't want to go anything below that. He wasn't interested in it. He was only interested in the savage Indian story. He wrote this in a book or a document. Glen Beck has this book, and he's going to read the exact same thing. So I was very glad to see that. A few other things Glen Beck talked about was he was confused as to why he used to have this series on Fox News about hidden history, black people's hidden history, and he was asking the question, why don't we know about this? So he was real confused, and tonight I got an answer for him. Okay, now before I go any further, I'm gonna read the goal of this channel. The goal of this channel is to build an unstoppable army of knowledgeable melanated black people, in America and around the world that understand that we as melanated people have one enemy worldwide, and that enemy is the system of racism, white supremacy. Our mission through education is to replace this evil system with the system of freedom, justice, and equality as laid out by Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing. We will need your help in building this knowledgeable army. We will need your help building this knowledgeable army. You can help by by subscribing to this channel, by donating to this cause through CashApp or PayPal, and by sharing the videos you see here, the videos you watch here, and any knowledge that is shared. In doing so, together, we help fertilize the mentally enslaved, colonized minds of black melanated people worldwide, creating the perfect mental conditions for our children to grow up in a better, more balanced world. And the name of this channel is called The Big Black American Secret. And the secret is, you are an Aboriginal American. You are not a descendant of West African slaves. And I'm going to hit on that in this video a little bit here and there, just to kind of give you a little proof. Now, my goal is to spark your curiosity, to give you some facts which will allow you to question what you've been taught, and hopefully it'll spark your interest enough to where you will want to do your own personal research. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that is you'll want to dig into your own family's history. Talk to your oldest living relatives, your grandparents, your oldest uncles and aunties, and ask them questions. Do they know anything about Indian heritage? There's a strong possibility based on my research and me going out into the world on a daily basis and asking perfect strangers. And I don't go hard at people. I just simply engage a little bit, build a little rapport, and then I'll ask them a couple of questions. And 95% of the people I talk to say, yeah, we have Indian heritage. We have Indians in our family. And a lot of them I'll go a little further into the topic, or some of them I'll just ask them if they want to know more. I'll give them my contact information. But the whole thing is, it's not that you have Indian in your family. You are the Indian. Now, like I said, I'm going to get into that a little bit on this video, and I do get into it in all of my other videos, bits and pieces in each one. So I urge you to share this video, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, and hit all so that you're notified when I go live or I make another video. So there's a few things we're going to go over in this thing. Again, Glen Beck. Again, this is a white guy who had questions like, why don't we know about these black people in our history? Okay, so I'm going to turn my phone around and get into this. Okay, but first let me do this. Again, this channel is called The Big Black American Secret, and the secret is you are an Aboriginal American. You're not a West African slave. Now, this is a 1-cent copper penny. If you have one in your house, find one that matches the color of the back of your hand, or get close. This is pretty close to the color of the back of my hand. Okay? Now, technically, what that illustrates to you is that you are brown. You're a brown color. Okay? I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I'm just going to say it right out front. And the bottom line truth is that we're all just varying shades of brown. You probably have relatives in your family that are very, very light-skinned, damn near white. And then on the other end, you have other relatives that are mahogany, blue-black. We're all just varying degrees of brown. Well, there were discoverers and traders and people who did business on this continent that described the people they saw when they came here. So much so that it ended up in a dictionary in the year 1828. And we're going to look up that definition right now. And that's why I wanted you to compare the penny to the back of my hand, because the definition is going to tell you something really important. So here's that definition. I got it pulled up on the screen here. Make it a little bigger. Okay, so. All right. Well, all right, I'm gonna just do this. I got it pulled up here, and this is the top part of it, and down here we're gonna read the definition. But above it, you have this right here. Now, what is this showing you? This describes the natives, peoples that were here before Christopher Columbus and after him. Okay, and it's showing a penny, and it's asking you a question: is this penny color more close to this person who is an who is a black American, or this person who look like a child but she's an Eskimo? Which one does that more so look like, right? So that's what it's showing you. And here is a page in that dictionary from the year 1828, and it's also right here. Okay, so I'm going to read this so you can get it. It says 1828, that's the year, definition of American. And this is the 1828 Noah's Webster's Dictionary. It says American, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals. That's the people who come from the dirt of this continent, the Aboriginals, like the Aboriginals in Australia, or copper-colored races. The penny, the 1-cent copper penny is made out of copper. See what I'm getting here? Found here by the Europeans. Now, this is very important because this explains why you've been going through hell here in America, but now applies to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So what that's saying to you is Europeans have been stealing our identity are land, labor, and resources. That one definition describes who you are, Black American, and it also tells you that the Caucasians have been stealing, the descendants of the Europeans have been stealing your very American identity. Technically, you are the only true American. Technically, you are the only true American. This is why the Pan-African viewpoint is harmful to Black people in Americas, because it supports the racist ideology of white supremacy. And I know that's hard for some of y'all to hear, but it's absolutely true. If we take the stance that Africa is the cradle of civilization, because that's what they want us to think. They want us to think all life originated in Africa, because they found the jawbone of a Homo sapien in Ethiopia that dated back 2.8 million, 2.3, I believe, million years ago. Well, that may be true, but guess what? They don't allow digging here in America or any other continent down lower than the Clovis first theory. Remember what I first said when I first got on? The director of the Smithsonian did not want people digging down further than 13,000 years ago, because that would blow the whole theory, the racist theory of the out of Africa theory. If you blow that theory, you also blow the theory of the Neanderthal gene. If you blow the Neanderthal gene theory, you blow the whole myth of of Europeans being superior. Okay? And newsflash, Europeans are not superior, never have been. Europeans are an albinized defect of us. They're albinized. They're you may have relatives in your family that have albinism. They're very white colored. They have fucked up their eyes. They don't see too good. White hair, red hair. That's a defect in their skin. Their skin doesn't have any melanin. What took place in Europe, they say, about 10,000 years ago, was the Ice Age. What happened during the Ice Age? The Ice Age lasted, they say, for about 10,000 years. In Europe, in certain parts of Europe, there was an overcast which blocked the sun. It's like a cloud. So there wasn't very much vitamin D getting down to the people or the ground, and it's very cold. What happens when Black people don't receive that energy from the sun? It fucks with our bones, and it also causes people with melanin to have to die off from small illnesses like the common cold. Now, just the opposite happens to white people or albinized people. They thrive in the cold weather. So for that 10,000 year period, that small group of people were allowed to multiply. In a natural course of things, if albinos were being born, they wouldn't have made it long. They wouldn't have been able to keep up with the herd. These people get skin cancer and they die off pretty early. But that overcast allowed them to grow and multiply. Do you see how that works? So, white people don't have some Neanderthal gene. That's all a big myth. And just join my channel and get caught up to what I'm talking about. What you'll learn or hear tonight will prick your understanding, and it's gonna hurt your feelings a little bit too. Some of you who are unfamiliar, and it may cause you not to come back to this channel for a couple of weeks, but you will be back. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm just telling you the truth, and spirit recognizes truth. I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person. I grew up Christian like most of y'all did, but I've learned in my course of studying that all religions, no exceptions, all religions were given by the colonizer as a tool to weaken the spiritual people. Black people, melanated people, we're naturally spiritual people. We have a strong affinity for our creator. We need to be connected to our source, which is this universe. Some people call it God, some people call it Yahweh. Whatever you want to call that connectedness, you need it. So much so that they found out over thousands or hundreds of years, whatever it took, if you put a buffer in between the melanin man and woman and God or the creator, or whatever you want to call it, the universe, if you put a buffer in between them, you can put fear into that spiritual person. When you put fear into a person or a spiritual person, you can now control them with fear. I'll give you an example. If you're a Christian, this buffer is Jesus Christ. If you're a Muslim, this buffer is Allah, or whoever the Muslims are. And there's 300 different religions. There's not just two. I know they make you think that, but there are a bunch of different religions. Okay, I didn't mean to go off in that tangent, but obviously it was very important. But now, so I just read you the definition of American in the year 1828. Now, how did this definition escape us all these years? Because of the system of racism, white supremacy. Now, the system of racism, white supremacy is only 162 years old. And if you like me, you probably thinking racism has been around for thousands of years, or at least since the founding of this country, right? But no, it started in 1859. This definition is 1828, so it's before that. This book was printed before 1858. What happened in 1858? Charles Darwin wrote a book, and the book was talking about the origin of the species and natural selection, which gave white people the idea that genetically they were superior. And that idea caught on like wildfire. It spread it through the United States, and it spread it to all the rest of the world. That was the beginning of the system of racism, white supremacy. Before that, on this continent, it was European domination. You had black Europeans and white Europeans on this planet who saw themselves elevated above the black aboriginal, your relatives and mine. You understand what I'm saying? So there was a separation, but the two, the white European and the black European, were brothers and sisters from Europe, working together on this continent, even with the black, American for a spell, and then they had to be separated. There was an event that caused us to have to be separated, and I'll go through that event, I think, a little bit in this video. Okay, but so let me get into this now. So I wanted to explain to you who you are. You're an Aboriginal American. I just showed you the definition from the year 1828, and that you are a brown person. You're not a black person like the color of my shirt. We're all just varying shades of brown. Okay, now, for proof that there were white and black Europeans, I'm going to take your attention to a document, and this is a primary source, to a fellow named Benjamin Franklin. In 1751, he wrote a paper. He was very upset that England wanted to send a whole bunch of German people here to the colonies. He wasn't happy about it. He wrote a long note about it. But anyway, here is that article. And this article was found. You can find it at the foundersarchives.gov. This is Benjamin Franklin here, and this is the title of this document. It's Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind in the Year 1751. And it's a long article, and all I'm going to do is scroll down to the last two paragraphs, and I'm going to read this last two paragraphs here. And what you're going to hear in the next couple of minutes here is going to be very eye-opening. Very eye-opening, because we've all been taught that the Europeans were white people in Europe. All of Europe was white, no black people. Only black people in Europe was slaves, just like here in America, right? But here, let me read this. It says, and since detachment of English from the Britain sent to America, will have their place at home so soon supplied and increased so largely here, why should the Palatine Boers, that's a slang or slur name for Germans, and you'll get that in a minute, but why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlement and be herding together, establishing their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize, see, German, to Germanize us instead of us Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. Now I'm going to pause here. Benjamin Franklin, a direct source, an eyewitness account, telling you that white people on the face of the earth are a small group of people, always have been, and they're still small today. But here's what the system of racism, white supremacy does. It promotes the idea, it tells black people that we are the what? Minority. We're the minority. Everywhere we go, we're the minority, which automatically makes you think that they are the majority. No. Biden himself, President Biden himself, a few months ago, in a meeting that he was having with a whole bunch of black leaders, black bootlicks, I call them, and it got leaked out. It wasn't supposed to reach the public, but Biden was scolding the black people. He was saying, "Hey, look, America's not only in trouble because of the black people, America's in trouble because in 20 years, the Europeans in America are going to be a minority." He says, "We're going to be a minority, and you black people are going to have to learn to work with the Mexicans." Now, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's what he said. You know what I'm saying? So you can find that on YouTube somewhere, where Biden is talking about low numbers for white people. See what I'm saying? But they always telling us that our percentage when it comes to voting is like 11 or 14%. we're 14% of the population, and that's not true. We are the majority in as far as population goes. That's why they do so much when it comes to voting. These people, they'll redline districts. They'll do everything they can to control the vote. And we're seeing that right now because we got this other vote coming up on us in 2022 and then again 2024. So if our numbers were very small in reality, then why would they work so hard to control our vote if it didn't mean but 14%? We can only move the needle 14%. You see the level of bullshit that's been going on with us? Now, so he told you, white people on the face of the earth, very small group of people, because again, they're an albanized defect, genetic defect of us. They came from us. The black man and woman are the mothers and fathers of civilization on this planet. So we have to outnumber them just because. Hell, the sun gives those people cancer. You see what I'm saying? So we have to think about these things logically. And we've all got cobwebs on our brain because of the system of racism, white supremacy. That's why Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's video is in the description. Every black person need to see that video. Every man, woman, and child that's black need to see that video. If you have children, sit down with your kids and watch that video. I'm telling you, it's going to change your life. It will change your life, guaranteed. Now I'm going to get back to this, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. All Africa is black or tawny, and tawny means brown. Asia, chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. Wholly so what? Black and brown. Do y'all get that? And in Europe, the Spanish, the Italian, French, Russian, and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion. Swarthy complexion means dark complexion, means black. Okay? As are the Germans also. The Germans are black. So he didn't want any more black people here in America. His own words. This is a direct source. The Saxons only accepted, who with the English makes up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. The English and the Saxons make up the sole body of white people on the face of the earth. Now I'm gonna read that again, but instead of saying tawny and swarthy, I'm gonna say what the definition of those words mean. So here goes. Which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. All Africa is black and brown, and it still is. Asia chiefly brown, and yeah, the Asians were dark as us. They just had different phenotypes because again, they're an albanized of us. Our melanated people in Asia during the Ice Age, they gave birth to genetic defects, which turn out to be these mongoloid Asians. Our people had these phenotypes like this, and they had the woolly hair, but they were brown like us, but they looked like they Chinese. People, you can't make this shit up. I promise you, it's all in your face, but we've been misdirected to look here, not to know what we're looking at. But anyway, Asia chiefly brown, America exclusive of the newcomers, and the newcomers, of course, are the pilgrims. Exclusive of the newcomers, black and brown. We were already here. And in Europe, the Spaniards, the Italians, the French, the Russians, and the Swedes are generally of what we call a black complexion, a dark complexion. As are the Germans also. The Saxons only accepted, who with the English make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I wish their numbers were increased. He wished there were more white people. And while we are, as I may call it, scoring our planet by clearing America of woods, and they're cutting down trees and making plantations and homes and buildings, and also shipping wood to England. So they're chopping down trees. So if you're cutting down trees, then the sun can get down to the ground, making it a brighter planet, which means making it a more whiter planet is really what he's saying in code. Okay? By clearing America of woods and so making this side of the globe reflect a brighter light. Get it? More white people. To the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus. So if like you were in the sky, where Venus and Mars is looking down, and you cutting away the trees, then you would see more of the ground with maybe a brighter light. That's basically what he's saying. I hope you get that. Inhabitants, Mars or Venus. So why should we, in the sight of superior beings, those Martians, darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa? Why increase the black people, hearing them, the sons of Africa? Because at this point, this was after Bacon's Rebellion, where they considered the natives black here slaves or African slaves. See what I'm saying? They had already started the hijack in a lot of places, okay? By planting them in America, where, I'm sorry, let me back up. So what he was saying is, although he knew there were black and white Europeans in Europe, the darker Europeans had to have some African in them. You see what I'm saying? At this point, after Bacon's Rebellion, they had already started to think about themselves, different. But you get what I'm saying. I don't want to get too sidetracked. But anyway, he says it in his own. The sons of Africa, dark people. The Germans, the Swedes, the Italians, dark people. So in Europe, you had black Europeans and you had white Europeans. That's the whole golden point, right? By planting them here in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all black and browns, of increasing the lovely white and red. And I just showed you, white and red, right? The Indians were called the red man. Well, let's do this. Let's look up the definition of the color of the penny, right? So we'll go here. Now, on the screen, you see here you have a whole assortment of pennies. The top row are newly minted pennies. See here it says red, newly minted. These are starting to become oxidated, brown and red and brown. And then down here, you have brown, right? These are, of course, older pennies. So let's read this definition. It's going to blow your mind. It says, to accurately grade copper coins, you must be able to describe the color of the copper. Over time, the bright orange-red color of a freshly minted copper coin, such as the Lincoln coin, will diminish and fade to a deep chocolate brown color. A deep chocolate brown color. As this degradation of color occurs, there are varying degrees of which both red and brown colors will exist simultaneously on the surface of the coin. This color designation only applies to uncirculated coins. Uncirculated, right? Uncirculated coins. All circulated coins are assumed to be brown. Assumed to be brown. So when Benjamin Franklin is talking about the red man, he was telling you the brown man. Our ancestors, the American Aboriginals, the brown man. Do you see how that works, right? Okay. Now, of course, we were all told about the transatlantic slave trade, which was a lie to support, again, the racist theory that white people are superior. So in order for them to be superior, then all black people had to come out of Africa because they're slaves. Do you see how this works? But let me tell you, that transatlantic slave trade was not only told to us in reverse, it was a cover story, a lie to cover up a real slave trade that took place on this continent. What did they tell us about the Indians and Indian slavery? They said that they came here, they tried to enslave the Indians. The Indians knew the land, they would run away and couldn't be found. This is the story you heard, yes? You saw that movie Roots, Alex Haley, back in the 80s, yeah? Did you know that Alex Haley was sued for plagiarism? Successfully sued, settled out of court, because he plagiarized that story from a white guy. Yeah, yeah. People, you can't make this shit up. Okay? So I'm going to show you the real slave trade here in the Americas, right? It's called the International Indigenous American Slave Trade. European colonies purchased indigenous people as slaves as part of the International Indigenous American Slave Trade, which lasted from the 15th century, which is the 1400s, with Christopher Columbus, until the 19th century, which is the 1800s. When Christopher Columbus came here, he started enslaving the indigenous people here, the Indians, and sending them, to different parts of Europe, to Spain. He even sent them to Sierra Leone, West Africa. That was a pirate hub, Pirates of the Caribbean. So they enslaved Indians. There were 94 documented Indian wars on this continent for the sole purpose of slave catching, but they didn't tell us about this. They told us they couldn't enslave the Indians. Woo! But guess what? Those weren't the Indians. No. Those people were put in our history book to further help the white European steal our very American identity. If you get a chance, get your 2020 census. You can find it at the library. You can probably go online, but you can find a section that says American Indian. At the very bottom, it'll say Eskimo community. These people are Eskimos. They came across the Bering Strait about 13,000 years ago. That's what leading paleontologists tell us. So they were put in our history book to replace us as the American Indians, and we were given the wrong title of West African slaves. Okay? That's how that worked. Again, all psychological operations to mind fuck us into thinking we're someone else. Because think about it, if you knew that this land was yours, you'd move differently. You'd fight for it. They don't want you to fight for it. They want you to think that you're some bastards from another continent. That puts your mindset in a certain state of mind. That really does give you a slave mind, because you don't feel connected. You feel what I'm saying? But you are the only true heir to this dirt under your feet. You are the only true American. That's why I'm so passionate about this. When I found out what was really going on, and I started doing my own genealogy and researching my people, talking to my older relatives and other people, I'm like, wow, holy fuck. I've got to get this information out to my people, because we need to know this. I will not leave this planet until everybody I know knows this. My children and great-grandchildren will not grow up the way I grew up, thinking I'm a West African descendant of slavery. And some people say, well, why? What are you ashamed of being African? Well, no, it's not that. There's no shame at all. I'm just not African. And it's a good chance you're not either. From what I know so far, here's what you probably have in your family line. Sephardic Jew, Moor, Black European, or Native American. Why did I say this? Sephardic Jews and Moors were the first plantation owners on the Americas in the 1500s. They were given land by France and in England to start plantations, which needed slaves. They sent over a whole bunch of Irish and European peasants to work as indentured servants in those plantations. They also had Native Americans working in those plantations, some as chattel slaves and some as indentured servants. Indentured servitude was a term of 7 to 14 years. You work those terms and then you're free. You're free of your indenture. You might get lump sum of money, some land, or whatever. But this is what happened. So that's why I say you have Sephardic Jew, Sephardic Jews and Moors, Europeans, Black Europeans, and Indian ancestry, if your people are from this continent. We have found zero proof of African ancestry of the people here, because that just did not happen. Like, again, our people were enslaved in the Caribbean islands and sent to all over different places. So it started in the Caribbean islands with Christopher Columbus, and then slavery branched out to the motherland here. Okay, so so this was the real slave trade here on this continent. It's called the International Indigenous American Slave Trade, but you never heard about it. So you have to think, if these people are hiding this kind of shit from you, you got to know they done fed you a whole bunch of other bullshit. You know what I'm saying? You got a whole indigenous American slave trade. And supposedly the indigenous people supposed to be these Indians. Woo! You see what I'm saying? But no, you never heard about these people being enslaved, because they weren't. Our people were enslaved. We are the indigenous Americans. I hope this is starting to make a little sense to you. Okay? Now, in this video, I'm going to show you a couple other videos. So I'm leaning on fair use, because this is for educational purposes only. Okay? So, I think that's pretty much all the definitions that I kind of want to get into right now, because right now I want to get into what Glen Beck was talking about, because, I want to help you understand that there were both black Europeans and white Europeans. Benjamin Franklin just explained that to you. He broke it down. He says that there are white Europeans, a small number of which are English and Saxon. The rest of them are brown and black. The Italian, the Swedes, the Germans, all these other people look like you and I, right? So let's get into this, okay? And then I'm also going to show you how quick once the system of racism, white supremacy is planted in the hearts of people, if they're told they're superior, they start to act that way, and it happens in minutes. It don't take months, years. No, it happens in minutes. And I'm going to show you that too again. I also showed it in the other video, but it's amazing. Okay, so let's get to this, people. Let's get to this. Okay, let me do this. There's a professor, Dr. Jacqueline Batalora. She also made a video, and she wrote a book explaining that white people did not exist on the planet until a certain year. She says white people did not exist on the planet until a certain year. And the reason that is because white people didn't see themselves as white people in Europe. Europeans only saw themselves as Europeans, as they were both black and white. But they didn't see themselves as color. They only saw themselves from where they were from, like the Italians, the Swedes, the Russians, the Germans, all Europeans from different areas. Not about color. It's just about, do you understand that? So I'm gonna show a little bit of her video explaining to you about this what I'm telling you, because it's eye-opening as well. It'll lead us into the other thing. Okay, so let me turn this around, and I think I got everything hooked up here. Let's see. In this video, I'm gonna make it bigger. This is a YouTube video called "The Birth of a White Nation," and this is by Jacqueline Batalora, right? So I want you to listen to this.
White people did not exist before 1681. Again, white people did not exist on planet Earth until 1681. Number two, any claim that this group called white people, any claim that that group is rooted in biology or derived from genes or biology, or is innate or is from nature, is a lie. Third and final point, as a matter of foundational law, actually let me say it this way, white supremacy has been embedded in the United States of America from its founding as a matter of law. Now, I don't expect you to buy all that, to get all that, to believe.
Now, she said, white people didn't exist until a certain time. She just said that. And she says white, anything linking white to genetics is a lie. She said that out of her own mouth, right? So I wanted you to hear that. But I'm also going to fast forward. I want to say two. Well, let me just let it play a little bit, because this is a very revealing video. So let me just let it play a little bit.
All that, at least not now. But my job is to share with you the legal history that proves each of those three claims that I begin with. So let's go. Let's get started. We have to begin this conversation in colonial North America, specifically in the colonies, the British colonies of Maryland and Virginia. Both were British colonies and both shared a number of particular characteristics. First, their economies were rooted in tobacco farming. If you know much about tobacco farming, it requires tremendous human labor. Lots and lots of workers. So those who owned large plantations, big landholders, constantly needed laborers to do the work to grow the tobacco. In addition to sharing an economic base, both colonies had an incredible gender imbalance, roughly 10 men for every woman. Now, let's understand a little bit about the folks who constitute the people in these two colonies. Oh, and by the way, let me give you a year. We're in the early 1600s, okay? The early part of the 17th century, colonial North America. England had, for some bizarre reason that today demographers cannot explain, there was a population boom in England in the early 17th century. So there were lots and lots of poor British people who were on the public doles, who couldn't find a way to make a living.
Now, she said that for some strange reason, there were lots and lots of poor people who demographers, for some reason, don't know where they came from. They just kind of just appeared from nowhere. Well, those people didn't just show up out of anywhere. There were two wars going on at the time. The 11-Year War, which lasted from 1641 to 1653. It included the Irish Rebellion, the Confederate War, and the Cromwell conquest of Ireland, and also the War of the Grand Alliance, which were the Williamites and the Jacobites War of 1869 to 91. So these people, who she said her demographers don't know where they came from, these were prisoners of war from Ireland and Germany, who were prisoners of wars, who were in jail, probably facing death, because they were prisoners of war. They were criminals. So the King of England said, hey, we're going to send these people to the colonies because we need a whole bunch of slave labor. We're going to make them an offer they can't refuse. Hey, you're headed for life in prison or death. Guaranteed. You're going to die in these cells, or you're going to die within the next couple of weeks. But I got an opportunity for you. You can sign an indenture, go work in our penal colony in the newly formed colonies in America for 7 to 10 years. And after that, you get your freedom. You're a free man. After your freedom, you can buy some land. You can get married. You can own guns. Hell, man, you're free. How does that sound to you? Who wouldn't sign up for that, right? So this explosion of poor people, this is where they came from. I don't know if she knows this. She's acting like she don't, so I'm assuming she don't. But, this is exactly what it is, people. See, whenever white people have that, they say, well, for some strange reason, or we don't know where this came from, you have to look carefully at them situations, because that's where something is hidden. And it's usually pertaining to black people, okay? So I'm going to turn around and let it continue, because she just dropped a big one now.
Who couldn't feed themselves. So the king in England was quite happy to have them sign a contract of indenture to then go work in the British colonies. And that is what happened. Both indentured and enslaved persons according to historian Edmund Morgan, were sold and traded like cattle. But of course, not all laborers stand equal in terms of their labor agreement or lack thereof. Those who came under a term of indenture worked for a term of years, and presumably this indenture was an agreement that they chose to enter into. The terms of indenture were largely protected by British law, although the terms that took form in colonial North America were quite different than those that existed in England. For example, in England, indentured servants could marry because that was viewed as the way to produce the next group of workers. In this country, indentured servants were prohibited from marrying, and if women were unfortunate enough to get pregnant during their term of indenture, they added usually about 7 to 9 years onto their term of indenture and 1 year to the father. Slavery, of course, was a status that came with life, work for life. There was neither British law nor international law to prohibit or restrict slavery. What we do know is that at this time period in colonial North America, there were free persons of African descent.
Dodge the hijack. Not African.
We know that landholders freed slaves. They did so in wills. They did so by allowing them to purchase their own freedom or the freedom of a family member. The vast majority of workers, laborers, in colonial North America at this time were British men, British workers, the vast majority. There were some women, there were some European laborers from Portuguese, Dutch, folks from Ireland and from Scotland are also revealed in the records, but the vast majority were British men. There were small numbers of persons of African descent.
Dodge the hijack. Those were native blacks.
Of members of native tribes.
Again, native blacks.
But in this slide, I'm trying to capture the socioeconomic ladder, and really that ladder should be about as long as this room. The landholding elite are, in today's parlance, that's the 1%. And the vast majority of folks who were in the colonies were laborers. Again, they were British, other Europeans, Africans, and members of native tribes. Here's what I find folks have the most difficult time with.
Now this is real important, people.
We tend to really struggle with getting a good picture of social life, the social context at this juncture. We're very good at understanding the social relations that exist later, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But pre-Bacon's Rebellion society is something that we generally in this country struggle to grasp. So I'm going to do my best to paint a broad stroke picture of this time period. What we know is that British and African laborers worked, ate, and slept together. Furthermore, the evidence from this period, which covers the first 3/4 of the 17th century, that the anecdotal evidence reveals that they lived under similar conditions and faced the same opportunities and chances to make it once one was free of their term of service.
Now, it's a big mystery to white folks, but she's saying during this time frame, these folks was treated the same. We don't know why, but they treated the same. And the reason is you had black and white Europeans, not just white Europeans. You see what I'm saying? Black and white Europeans. They just considered themselves all European. The blacks were the native blacks. And you'll get into it, but I just wanted to let you know that.
Whether free of enslavement or free of indenture. So let's review this. British laborers constituted the vast majority of the populations in both colonial Maryland and colonial Virginia. all men, of course, because the law of coverture, let me tell you something about that law of coverture. The law of coverture is derived from British common law, and it structures marriage. And this is how Barrister Blackstone famously described the law of coverture. In marriage, the man and the woman become one, and the one is the man. You didn't have the right to retain your own wages. You couldn't create estate planning, wills, or trusts without the approval of a man. So all men who were free of indenture or enslavement faced the same opportunities in these colonies as a matter of law. For example, free men of African descent could own servants or slaves.
Dodge the hijack, African.
They could vote, and they did. They could marry persons of the opposite sex. God, and I love that I have to make that qualification now. Woo! They could marry persons of the opposite sex regardless of national origin, and they did. In fact, marriages between men of African descent and women primarily of British descent were not uncommon at all. In one county, 1/2 of the free men of African descent were married to a European woman.
Now, what she's saying right there is, when she says of African descent, she's talking about the native blacks. Because remember, the European blacks were not considered black. They were just European. So whenever she's talking about African, these people are not African. There's no proof that these people are African. They are native blacks, your ancestors and mine. But when she mentioned it, she says, the men of African descent married European women or white women, and they did. Because again, at this time, the European black and white people was down here working side by side with and these were poor Europeans, the people who were just getting ready to have their asses handed to them in jail in Europe, and they come over and sign an indenture, and they're working to get the freedom. So these were poor Europeans, both black and white, okay, side by side with the native blacks. I just want y'all to understand that. Whenever you hear the term African, just remember to dodge the hijack, because African is, again, that's just a hijack. It's just a flat out lie to support the theory of racism, superiority for white people, okay? Good. Now,
there was a challenge to these marriages, but it did not come from the masses. It came from elites, and that's what we're going to talk about next. All right, this little depiction is meant to be a depiction of the lawmakers in Maryland, colonial Maryland lawmakers. They passed a law in 1664 punishing, and I quote, British and other freeborn women who marry enslaved Negro men. The punishment for entering into these marriages was that the woman herself would be enslaved for her husband's life, and any children they have would be enslaved into their 20s.
And y'all heard you say Negro.
Now imagine that you are a plantation owner. That's not a bad deal. I get more property. I like that. And that is exactly what happened. Rather than deter these marriages, which is the express intent of the law of 1664, rather than deter them, these marriages were encouraged by property owners, because that in fact, that such a marriage increased their property value. This law of 1664 represents, if not the first, certainly the precursor to anti-miscegenation law. These are laws that punished or prohibited marriage between, notice that white people didn't exist yet in 1664, at least as referenced in that law. But most generally speaking, anti-miscegenation law prohibited and punished marriages between a white person and a specific non-white person or persons. Let me be really clear. I read all the time in history books, in academic texts, and I read anti-miscegenation law described as prohibiting interracial marriage. That's not correct. For example, a member of a native tribe could marry a person of Chinese descent. Both were understood as racially distinct, but never did
Okay, she's getting into anti-miscegenation laws. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit because she's gonna get into the fact that something changed because the term white wasn't used. What was the switch? What was the catalyst that all of a sudden now we have white people? Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward a little bit and see if we can get to that part because all of this other, you can watch this whole video, well, more of it on my other the other video I made, but I kind of want to get to a few other different videos. So like I said, I'm gonna fast forward to a different part here. Let me see if I can just kind of move it ahead a little bit.
That come out of this particular law. What's the result? Who becomes more available for who? We see a further step in locating patriarchal power squarely among in that particular law. So the question becomes, well, what the heck happened between 1664 and 1681? And the answer is Bacon's Rebellion. This was a massive revolt in the colony of Virginia that lasted more than a year. Let me give some background of the seeds of this rebellion, what helped give rise to this violent outburst. Those who were enslaved, I don't think it's hard to imagine, were by definition of their status disgruntled laborers. And remember that pool of readily available workers from England who were poor and happily sent off in the guts of ships? Well, they dried up. That population surge ended, and there was no longer a pool of laborers from Britain available to handle the work on the plantations in the colonies. The result is they began to impose harsher punishments on indentured servants who were already here, so that relatively minor infractions would result in significant extensions to their years of service. Those who completed their term of indenture or who were released from their status as enslaved were frustrated. They were frustrated because the King of England gave almost all of the farmable land to his buddies. And even if they could find land to grow tobacco on, prices dropped and taxes went up. So land and other opportunities became much more limited. So this guy, Nathaniel Bacon, the guy pointing his arm, he didn't have to search very far for disgruntled laborers. Both those who were enslaved or indentured faced worse treatment, and those freed faced less ability to make a future for themselves. Persons of European and African descent fought in the first phase of Bacon's Rebellion against members of native tribes, and then in the second phase of Bacon's Rebellion against the British ruling elite. Nathaniel Bacon ultimately died from wounds that he received in a battle, and England sent troops into the colony, and that eventually quashed the rebellion, but not without having made a significant impression upon those who wielded authority and were threatened by this rebellion. Remember, this rebellion lasted over a year, and records from lawmakers in Virginia to the Legal Oversight Authority in England revealed that over 30% of the population were in support of the rebellion. Here were the lessons from Bacon's Rebellion. A united labor force is a threat to the form of capitalism taking hold within the colonies. Virginia lawmakers wrote letters to the Oversight Authority in London explaining that they intended to pursue a divide and conquer strategy in order to prevent future rebellion. It's only after Bacon's Rebellion that we see the emergence of white people as a group of humanity. Let's think about this for a minute. 1681, some lawmakers invent a new label for a group of people. Imagine, if you will, just for a second, for fun here, that I'm a lawmaker, and I just pass a law claiming that 3/4 of you in this room are crunchies. Okay? So 3/4 of you are crunchies, and the other quarter of you are not. Who gives a damn? Who would care? Some silly lawmaker came up with a label for you. It's really unlikely that it would mean much. But let's say I follow it with this. Those who are crunchies, you can pay no more than $25 a night for that hotel. No more. Those who are crunchies are the first to come into any room at this conference and the first to leave. The first in line at the bathroom, at lunch, at any other line that forms, and the first to get to leave. And that these privileges and advantages that come by virtue of this label that I asserted upon you as a lawmaker continues when you walk out these doors. That it shapes how you are treated and what you get to do for years and years to come. Imagine you're one of the crunchies. Imagine how you might start to feel. Wow, I must be special. Imagine you're not a crunchy. Wow, what's wrong with me? This is not fair. Let's return to the divide and conquer strategy. Laborers prior and through Bacon's Rebellion were united. They lived the same darn lives. They faced the same opportunities, rights, and privileges once they were freed from enslavement or free from indenture. That's about to change. A slew of laws were passed in the decades after Bacon's Rebellion and continued to get passed into the first quarter of the next century.
See this here, it says free blacks. That's native blacks. Blacks and native tribes. So free blacks prohibited from holding office. Again, these are native blacks. Anytime they say black people, they're talking about the native blacks. They're not talking about the European blacks, because the Europeans are just considered Europeans. But now they're finna do something, and they're finna raise the level of Europeans, both black and white, to the level of white people. So if you're in that category of white, you're a black European and you're a white European, you have special things that you're going to get. You have privileges now. Whereas the native blacks and the free blacks, same people, don't have these same privileges. Okay. And this is the divide and conquer. Free blacks prohibited from holding office. Blacks and native tribes prohibited from marrying white women. And that's European women. Whites required to be paid goods, including guns and powder. Black people couldn't own guns and couldn't buy powder, right? Okay, so let's continue.
The first slew of laws.
Free blacks prohibited from possessing weapons.
The prohibition of free blacks from holding public office. The prohibition of blacks and native tribal members from marrying whites. The requirement that whites, upon completion of their terms of service, be paid goods, including guns and gunpowder. A prohibition of free blacks possessing a weapon. We're going to come back to that. The prohibition of blacks testifying against whites. These laws began to give different meaning to these labels that prior to this moment just referenced where your nation of origin was. Not anymore. I want to return quickly to the law that prohibited free blacks from possessing a weapon. What this law did was essentially strip free black men of their ability to hold patriarchal power. Because look, under the law of coverture, here's how things worked. Men were in control, controlled women, their spouse, controlled their children, and had legal authority to do so, including severe beatings, all financial assets and land. The man had the control, but the exchange was that in exchange for that authority, he protects. That's the trade-off for patriarchal power. Stripped, made impossible by virtue of this law. And then let's look at this law that prohibited blacks from testifying against whites. We will see that throughout U.S. history.
Okay, so I think we got the gist of this. After Bacon's Rebellion, the rich people here in Americas and in England said, hey, we can't have these people on the same level. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the black and white Europeans up to the level of white people. And these people are going to stay here. They're just going to be black, slaves, whatever we want to call them. They're just black people. They're just your niggers. Now, the Europeans who are both black and white, they're considered white. Now, white in this context is a label given to wealthy Europeans, regardless of skin color. Europeans with money and influence were considered white. And I'm going to prove that to you. I'm going to find another definition for you real quick. And then you see, if you raise a person's title and you give them privileges, it changes their mindset. They feel like they better than these black people who they was just buddies with. It's kind of like in high school. These your privileged kids up here. They don't even want to hang out with you no more. They're up here now. You feel what I'm saying? So let me see if I can find this definition real quick. And then we'll move on until the other videos. Let's see. Excuse me. Okay. It's a fella named George Bungo, right? Let's see if I got a picture of him. Yeah. George Bungo. Okay, so here's George Bungo. George Bungo. And it says under here, it says African American and Owaji. I want to say that's the Owaji tribe. And you have to dodge the hijack when they say African. Whenever they see a black person, after 1859, when they was doing all the literature and stuff, they always throw that African in there because, again, the system of racism, white supremacy. So what I'm gonna read is his biography. Now see him. He's dark skinned. He's more darker than me, right? Check this out. This is proof that Europeans considered themselves white people, whether they was black-skinned or not, right? So it says, I'm going to read this part here. I think it says, Bongo followed in his father's footsteps. Okay, let me go up a little bit further. Okay, so again, it says African-American, but I want you to notice something, his name. It says, George Bongo's father, Pierre, was the son of Jean and Marie. Jean is a French name, okay? It's a good chance that this guy has French ancestry, not African. Because remember, Benjamin Franklin said that the French, the Swedes, are black people. So Pierre was born George Bongo's father, Pierre, was the son of Jean and Marie Jeanette Bongo. It says enslaved people who had been brought to the fort on Mackay Island by their enslaver, Captain Daniel Robinson, a British officer who commanded it from 1782 to his death in 1787. The couple became liberated at his death and legally married. Bongo and his wife opened the first hotel on the island. Pierre Bongo worked as a fur trader with the Owaji near Duluth, and I may be pronouncing that's a Native American tribe. His first son, Stephen Bongo, born 1799, also became a notable fur trader and translator in the region. The sons had a sister, Margaret, born 1797 or 1797 or 1798. As Pierre Bongo was a relatively successful trader, he sent George to Montreal. Montreal is a French territory in Canada. See, these people were French. They were black, Aboriginal Europeans from France for school. When the youth returned to the Great Lake region, he spoke fluent English, French, as well as Owaji. You see what I'm saying? This dude was a European. Now here's further proof. Bongo followed in his father's footsteps and became a fur trader with the American Fur Company. In his role, Bongo drew the attention of Louis Case, who hired him as a guide and as a translator for the government's negotiation with the Owaji tribe. Bongo's signature is on treaties in the 1820 and 1867. Bongo had gained an education among both European and Owaji society and frequently crossed their borders. Comfortable in white and Owaji societies, Bongo identified with both. Reportedly, Bongo called himself one of the first 2 white men in northern Minnesota. He was speaking of his participation in white culture. He criticized white men who treated Owaji trappers unfairly. White culture. And one other translation said American. Let me see if I could find it. It said instead of white culture, it said it a little differently. Just want to see if I could find it real quick. If not, I'll move on. Okay, I'm not really seeing it here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it here, but anyway, again, I read that to you because it was proof that he is it's a black European who considered himself white. Considered himself white. That's a huge thing. So you see, people, Europeans were, whether they were black or white, considered themselves white as a tax status, whiteable. Wasn't a skin color, okay? Very important, okay? Now we're gonna get into this Glen Beck person who I mentioned earlier on in the video, because he was confused as to why the black people in our history books weren't being talked about. It's like, well, what's the big mystery, right? So let's see if we can get off into this. So I'm gonna make the screen a little bigger. Okay, let me turn this around. And right here, he's talking about the pyramids here in North America that no one talks about.
Of 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet. 606. It's made up of staves. exactly the same. Now, if that's not interesting enough, look at the angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you take the angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the slope is 51.8 degrees. Let's go back to the earthworks. If you measure the line that goes straight through the center of the structure, right here, and then you go true north, it's 51.8 degrees. That angle is exactly the same angle as the pyramids of Giza. It is the same math, the same calculations as ancient Egyptians. Let me show you one more connection. In 1860, David Wyrick, he's a guy who surveyed the Newark earthworks.
So
he
now
was digging into a mountain
I'm going to fast forward this to a part that I was telling you earlier about the director of the Smithsonian Institute. And if I can. Okay, yeah, this is it right here.
This is the Smithsonian Annual Report, 1882, 1883. This is John Wesley Howell. This is an original copy. John Wesley Howell in 1789. Again, this is Powell. This is the director of the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian Institute. He said this: artifacts found prior to Christopher Columbus's arrival would be considered illegitimate by the Smithsonian. Only the savage Indian culture would be observed, and this created the artificial barrier to science. Only the savage. Science was colluding with government because of commerce, and religion was involved. Now, why do I tell you all this stuff? Not because I'm in...
He said that. So the director of the Smithsonian wasn't interested in anything historic before Christopher Columbus. He only wanted that information after Christopher Columbus because that gave credence to the Clovis first theory and the savage Indians, which are the Mongolian breed of Indians that they placed in our history books to convince us of others. But he said something real important here. Science, government, commerce, religion, all colluded to cover up this history. All got on the same page to cover up this history. So it's kind of like, man, did these people have meetings once a year to get together and do this? No, they didn't. Once that idea was planted that in the brains that these people are superior, by Darwin's book, they all just started moving in the same direction. Now, I'm going to show you another video in a few minutes that's going to show you how it happens like that. Okay, so you saw all of that, right? So let me close this. And he gets into another video here where he's confused as to why all the hidden black people, Let's make it a little bigger here.
Questions by the end of the program. Why would our schools leave all of this history out? I mean, this is some of the greatest American story that you've ever heard. Why would they do that?
And I apologize, it's kind of grainy, but...
And it's everywhere. You just don't know where to look. If you take a look at the revolutionary paintings of revolutionary times, here it is. This is a Boston Tea Party. Bunch of white guys, and these people strangely looking like Indians, and they're not. But that's it. Not a lot of racial diversity. If you watch movies, one great movie, this is John Adams. You watch John Adams and you don't see a lot of racial diversity. I'm currently watching Johnny Tremaine. This is, I love this movie. I remember this growing up. I was watching it with my kids just last night, and I noticed there are a couple of American Indians, but you don't see any African Americans unless they're slaves.
They're slaves. Anytime in our history, anytime they mention black people, they're African slaves. You see that? Okay.
They will show people as slaves, but that's it. Now, I want to show you a painting of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Here's the Battle of Bunker Hill. Bunch of white guys, right? Unless you know where to look. Right here. That's Peter Salem. He was actually the hero of the battle. It doesn't look like he's a hero there. He looks like he's cowering behind the white guy with a sword. He was the hero of the battle. And he saved scores of American lives that day. Why don't we know this? Look here. African American, helping row the boat across. You know what his name was? Prince Whipple. He fought alongside Washington during the Revolution. Take a look at this one. This painting of, this is the Marquis de Lafayette. If you look at this, you just think, oh yeah, and then he made his slave dress up like I don't know what. But that's what you would think, right? This guy is incredibly important. This guy may have won the Revolutionary War. James Armistead was his name. How did he win the Revolutionary War? Double spy. I'm going to let David tell the story here in a minute, but basically the Brits thought that he was spying for them, but he was spying for General Washington. He'd give the Brits bad intel and reveal the good critical information to General Washington. Did you know this story? Why? I'm so tired of people saying...
So he asked the question, why? That's because these black people were Europeans. That's why. That's why. That's why. They were European. They weren't slaves. But I'm going to let it keep going because there's some old juicy information in here.
Saying, well, it was just the white people, white people, white people. No. No. Why are we intentionally leaving others out? There are black founders in history. If I asked the
You heard that? He said there are black founders.
When did America have its first African-American judge? What year would you say? Anybody? Take a guess. Judge. 1860s? Anybody? 1770. Amy, is that just a wild guess?
No, not. I wasn't sure exactly, but I think it's about
1770. Tell me.
1768. Wentworth Cheswell, New Hampshire, elected to office in New Hampshire. He was reelected for the next 49 years, held 8 different political positions. Really cool story about him is we all know that Paul Revere made his midnight ride. We also know he wasn't the only guy riding that night. Now the guy riding went with Cheswell, black and white riding.
How is it possible? Did you know that we had an African-American ride to say the British are coming, the British are coming? Amy did. Amy did. Anybody else besides Amy know that? 2, 3. Okay, 3 people in the audience.
Now, the white guy with the sword is Thomas Grosvenor. So you have Thomas Grosvenor and you have Peter Salem, black and white fighting side by side. But Peter is definitely the hero that day. 1817, this painting is done, and all the way up until the 1980s, we knew that that was Peter Salem, the hero of Bunker Hill. 1980s, the professors got together and said, oh no, that's not Peter Salem. We think that that's Grosvenor's slave is who that is. It's not Peter Salem.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, in the 80s, they changed that from Peter Salem to Grosvenor's slave, Asaba. And that's what they say, oh no, it's not Peter, it's Asaba, Grosvenor, it's his slave. How come the guy who painted it and the guy who was there and the guy who saw it and painted what he saw had him as Peter Salem, and now we've all convinced, oh no, it's just like...
First, the one thing that I think is missing in America, and it is the key to America, has been the difference between individual rights and collective rights, and this man articulated that.
In a speech entitled Our Composite Nationality, Frederick Douglass said, I know of no rights of color superior to the rights of humanity. He thought the worst thing that could happen for blacks after the Civil War was to treat them as exceptions in the law. And so today, with the discursive logjam that we have over things like affirmative action and group rights, and the only thing that you get from government is if you ally with others who look like you or somehow are categorized like you.
This goes into your theory that this is why this is not being taught, because you can't play the victim card. If you don't,
It goes against the traditional victim narrative. After the Civil War, the history was actually written by the losers. That's the one time in history where the losers wrote the history.
That's exactly right.
Really interesting perspective.
That's exactly right.
All right, David, explain quickly. Let's go through these people.
Let's go through these. this guy right here. This is Lemuel Haynes. Lemuel Haynes is a soldier in the American Revolution. He's a black preacher. He's the first black preacher ordained in America that was a pastor of a white congregation in Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, several places.
A black professor in
Black
a
preacher.
white,
That's right, in a
I mean,
white church.
yeah, black minister.
The black minister in a white church in 4 different states. He was ordained in the Congregationalist denomination in 1785. He's the first black to receive a master's degree in America. He got that in 1804 from Middlebury College. So Lemuel Haynes, every year on Washington's birthday, he preached a special sermon about George Washington, his commander-in-chief, in all of his churches where he was. So we don't hear about Lemuel Haynes. This is Benjamin Banneker. I think he's the most brilliant scientist in American history. This guy, unbelievable what he did. He's the guy
More so than Franklin?
I would put Franklin and Banneker almost equal. Now, Franklin did a lot of inventions. This guy one time took a pocket watch. He taught himself how to read. He taught himself science. He wrote an almanac that 10 years ahead he was able to predict to the minute solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, 10 years before they happened. I mean, by watching the motion through a telescope, unbelievable what the guy did. He once took the back off a pocket watch, saw how it worked, went home and carved a wooden clock with all the gears, mainspring, and it was accurate to within 1 minute a year. A wooden clock the guy did. He's the guy who laid out Washington, D.C. He's the surveyor who did all that. He's a brilliant mathematician. Jefferson gave him...
Never knew this.
No. Jefferson gave him his example to France, said, hey, you guys in France think that blacks are inferior? Here's Benjamin Banneker.
Okay, representatives, I asked, when did we have our first black Speaker of the House? When did we have the first Speaker of the House? 1789. When did we have our first black Speaker of the House? I bet most people would say never.
Never. Except it was right here. Joseph Hayne Rainey. Joseph Hayne Rainey, South Carolina, is first black to preside over the House of Representatives. These are the first 7 blacks elected to Congress. You have here Senator Hiram Rhodes Rebels, the first black U.S. Senator elected. He was a minister of the gospel. He was a missionary. He worked with Frederick Douglass. He recruited 3 regiments of black soldiers in the Civil War, and he was a missionary to slaves in the South. You have here Benjamin Turner, Josiah Wall, the large. This guy right here is really cool. Robert Brown Elliott is probably the most brilliant guy of that era. He actually took on the vice president of the Confederacy in a debate.
Now, all of these are black senators, people that hold position in politics. Remember what the white lady was saying? She said that after Bacon's rebellion, native blacks couldn't hold office. Only Europeans could. These were black Europeans, people. These people were black Europeans. Please understand. Europeans didn't see themselves by color because they were white and black up until 1859 with the release of Charles Darwin's book. That's when the white Europeans went into kill mode. These people killed, the white Europeans set out to kill the black European. You cannot have white supremacy if you have also black people who have financial money and wealth and fame. You have to do away with those people. They lumped them into the category with blacks. They lumped all blacks into the category of native blacks or Africans or slaves, and they set out to kill them. The KKK was also created in the year 1859. Okay, so I think we about done with this video. So we're gonna go to this last video, which is to show you how quickly the white people took this idea of white supremacy, and within minutes the system started to grow on it. This one video blowed my mind because it shows you how this evil system, well, we've already laid out for you how the precursor was Bacon's Rebellion, because it elevated Europeans, both black and white, to the level of white. Okay? And then after Charles Darwin's book was released in 1859, the white Europeans were told that because of their DNA, that they're superior. Oh, and they ran with it. Now here's how quick the shit happens. Watch this. This next video is by Jane Elliott. It's an old video. And what's special about this video is...
This is a special week. Does anybody know what it is? Does anybody know what it is?
This is a group of third graders, right? These are kids. Their minds are unmolested. That's what makes this experiment so special, because it's true to human psychosis. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, this is so eye-opening, man. It's so eye-opening. So just listen.
This is a special week. Does anybody know what it is? National Brotherhood Week. What's brotherhood? Treat everyone as though he was your brother. And is there anyone in this United States that we do not treat as our brothers?
Yes.
Who?
Yeah.
The black people. Who else?
Indians.
Absolutely, the Indians. Many places in the United States. How are black people treated? How are Indians treated? How are people who are of a different color than we are treated?
They don't get anything in this world.
Why is that?
Because they're different color.
You think you know how I would feel to be judged by the color of your skin? I don't. Do you think you do? No, I don't think you'd know how that felt unless you had been through it, would you? It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Yeah.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Since I'm the teacher and I have blue eyes, I think maybe the blue-eyed people should be on top the first day. I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. This is a fact. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. You ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. I don't see the yardstick, do you?
It's probably right there. Hey, Miss Sir, you better keep that on your desk when the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh, you think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use? Who goes first to lunch?
Blue-eyed.
The blue-eyed people. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart. And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything.
It seemed like Mrs. Elliott was taking our best friends away from us.
What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting?
Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut.
What did he call you?
Brown eyes. They always call us that.
Yeah,
always call us brown eyes.
What's wrong with being called brown-eyed?
It means that we're stupid.
I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes. Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. I lied to you yesterday. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. Russell, where are your glasses?
I forgot them.
You forgot them. And what color are your eyes?
Blue.
Susan Ginder has brown eyes. She didn't forget her glasses. Russell Ring has blue eyes, and what about his glasses? He forgot them. Yesterday we were visiting, and Greg said, "Boy, I like to hit my little sister as hard as I can. That's fun." What does that tell you about blue-eyed people? The brown-eyed people may take off their collars, and each of you may put your collar on a blue-eyed person. The brown-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess. You blue-eyed people are not allowed to be on the playground equipment. You blue-eyed people are not to play with the brown-eyed people. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. They're smarter than blue-eyed people. And if you don't believe it, look at Brian. I use Orton Gilman Phonics. We used the card pack. The brown-eyed children were in the low class the first day, and it took them 5.5 minutes to get through the card pack. The second day, it took them 2.5 minutes. The only thing that had changed was the fact that now they were superior people. You went faster than I ever had anyone go through the card pack. Why? couldn't you get them yesterday?
We were putting collars on.
You think the collars kept you
just keep thinking about those collars.
Oh, and you couldn't think as well with the collars on.
Well,
4 minutes and 18 seconds. How long did it take you yesterday?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. How long did it take you today?
4 minutes and 18 seconds.
What happened?
One down.
What were you thinking of?
This.
I hate today.
How do you do? I hate too.
Because I'm blue-eyed.
See, I am too.
There's nothing, it's not funny, it's not fun, it's not pleasant. This is a filthy, nasty word called discrimination. We're treating people a certain way because they are different from the rest of us. Is that fair?
No.
Nothing fair about it. We didn't say this was going to be a fair day, did we?
No.
And it isn't. It's a horrid day. Okay, you ready? What did you people who are wearing blue collars now find out today?
I know what they felt like yesterday.
I did too. How did they feel yesterday?
Like a dog on a leash. Yeah. Like you're chaining them up into prison. Like and you're throwing the key away.
Should the color of some other person's eyes have anything to do with how you treat them?
No.
All right, then should the color of their skin?
No.
Should you judge people
No.
by the color of their skin?
No.
When you see a black man or an Indian or someone walking down the street, are you going to say, look at that silly looking thing?
No.
Does it make any difference whether their skin is black or white?
No.
Or yellow?
No.
Or red?
No.
Is that how you decide whether people are good or bad?
No.
Is that what makes people good or bad?
No.
Now you know a little bit more than you knew at the beginning of this week? Okay, now are you back?
Yes.
That feel better?
Yes.
Okay, people. So, to just give a recap, you're an Aboriginal American, and you also may have Aboriginal European in you, Sephardic Jew, and more, because those were the people who were sent to this landmass before you were born. Okay, there was no West African slave trade. The slave trade was of the indigenous Americans who were already here, your ancestors and mine. And they also sent indentured slaves from Europe, particularly poor Irish, German, Scottish people who look like you and I, a good majority of them. I'm pretty sure there was a few white people too, because Benjamin Franklin said white people are a small majority of people in Europe and England. You understand what I'm saying? So that should have been eye-opening for you, because again, we've been mentally brain fucked to believe we are West African slaves so that the Caucasians, the Europeans, can steal our identity, our land, labor, and our resources. And they use the transatlantic slave trade. They use the out of Africa theory. They use the false DNA information from bones talking about some Neanderthals. And they also use the Eskimos to do all of this. And all of this, the system of racism, white supremacy, because before that it was just European domination. You see what I'm saying? But in 1859, that was a pivotal point here in the United States. That was the very spark that kicked off the system of racism, white supremacy, because Charles Darwin, in his book, put in the idea in the minds of the white European that they are genetically superior. And instantly, you saw these little third graders, they started acting superior. You know what I'm saying? And of course, they started giving themselves perks. They were in a special class. They created all of this for themselves. And at the same time, they instantly started to kill off the black European. People, you've never heard this before because no one has ever said this before. You understand what I'm saying? But it's absolutely 100% true. Okay? And on that note, I'm going to end this video. But if you found any value in this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and hit all. Also, too, look at Dr. Francis Cress Welson's video in the description. Watch that whole video and get some understanding on this system of racism, white supremacy. It'll be the best thing you ever did for yourself and for your children. Okay? And share this information out, because you are the distribution arm of this, what we have. The white news medias are the propaganda arms of the system of racism, white supremacy. They have billions of dollars to spend to get their message out to the world. We don't have this big budget. We don't have news medias, and that's on purpose. But what we do have is each other. We have our cell phones and computers, and we have the ability to make little videos like this. We can pull information out of the world from the internet because of the Freedom of Information Act, and we can share this information amongst each other and dispel all of these myths so that we know who we truly are and we move differently. Okay, people? Join this army of knowledgeable melanated people and help me get this message out to the world. Learn about yourself. Find out your family story. Do your own genealogy. Start with talking to your oldest living relatives. Some of them may have information. Some of them may not, just like mine. I'll quickly tell you the story, a quick little thing. No, I don't have time to tell you my story. Join this channel. Watch all of my videos. My personal story is in a few of them, okay? On that note, I'm going to bid you a farewell. Good night. Be one, family.